Hi, in this lecture we discuss how to define the security of a system, and in particular, what is the definition of the cyber attacks that we have against cryptographic systems. So, in particular, we're going to need to define attack models. So we're going to talk about, in this particular lecture, we're going to emphasize chosen plaintext attacks and chosen ciphertext attacks and see why this is important to the definition of security. We'll also talk about semantic security and other security goals. And we'll mention side channel attacks because they really show that sometimes when talking about cyber attacks, you really have to think outside of the box. So how do we measure security when it comes to cryptographic schemes? So the traditional way of doing this is to model this as a game between a challenger and an adversary. The role of the challenger is to ask questions to the adversary, to pose challenges, and then the adversary will have to answer those challenges. So what we do with the adversary, of course, depends on certain parameters that we have to define. So each adversary has its own goal, right? So when defining an adversary for a particular cryptographic scheme, we have to agree on what is an adversary trying to do. Then its ability, so it's the security, the security, the attack scenario. So what is the adversary able to do in order to achieve its goal, right? And finally, we need to agree on how to score the performance of the adversary. So we define that, we call that the advantage. So we're going to give it a number, okay, and measure the performance. So a good adversary means that the system is not secure. On the other hand, the absence of a good adversary means that the system is secure. So in particular, and a lot of the times, the advantage can be measured by the probability of success of the adversary. So if the adversary that you define from its goals and abilities has a certain probability of success and that probability is very low, you think, well, that is not a very good adversary. On the other hand, if the probability is high, it probably is it's good adversary to defeat the particular crypto system you're looking at. So before we get started, we probably should define some terms that will come back a lot. So first, the plain text is the message with before the encryption, and after encryption, it becomes a ciphertext. And the key is a secret key is what everything that is kept a secret. Typically, a secret key is required at least to decrypt. And in a lot of cases, we'll see in a different lecture, a symmetric crypto, we also need the secret key to encrypt. So remember that the design itself is not a secret. If it were, then it would have formally to go inside of the key. But normally you have a public design, and then everything that is kept a secret is the secret key. And like I said, probably it's usually used at least to decrypt and sometimes also to encrypt. So the security goals really depend on the notion of security that you're trying to define. So there are security goals that are very classic and others that you could define, but they're not so relevant for practical applications. So for example, you could state the security goal for the adversary as decrypting a particular message or recovering a particular secret key. The one that I want to insist on in this particular lecture is called semantic security. It's a very standard security goal that is used, that's sort of considered as the practically the gold standard. Like it's not the gold standard, not the highest one, but at least the one for which we aim in practical applications. So let's see how this is defined. So the challenger draws a key at random, and the adversary picks up two messages, the messages of their choice, really. So it can be any pair of messages that are different, and then the adversary sends them to the challenger, and under the key, the secret key that they've chosen, the challenger will decide at random to encrypt one of these two messages and sends the encryption back to the adversary. And then the goal of the challenger, the goal of the adversary is to guess which message got encrypted by the challenger. Okay, so this is the security goal of semantic security. Okay, so it might seem a little bit underwhelming, but that's a good thing. Okay, so when you have a security goal that is modest for the adversary, then the absence of adversary achieving this modest security goal means that the system is secure. Okay, on the other hand, if it was a very hard goal, for example, retrieving the key or decrypting the messages, then perhaps it wouldn't be so secure. The crypto system wouldn't be so secure just because no adversary is able to achieve those goals. So now that we've talked about a goal, now let's describe attack scenarios. So again, there are multiple different attack scenarios. I want to discuss two very classic attack scenarios, starting with the chosen plaintext attack. So what does this mean? It means that we're going to define the rules of the game in which the adversary is trying to achieve its goal. So like we saw before, for example, guessing between two messages, guessing which one got encrypted. Okay, so in a chosen plaintext attacks, the adversary chooses a bunch of plaintext. So remember, plaintext is a message before it gets encrypted. And then they send it to the challenger, and the challenger has to encrypt them and sends the encryptions back to the adversary. Then the adversary does the little routine that will lead to the test of semantic security. So they choose two messages, they send them to the challenger, and the challenger chooses one at random to encrypt, sends back the encryption. Now, of course, so here it's very important that none of these requests, of course, match. None of the requests of the plaintext that were encrypted matched the plaintext that the challenger chose, of course. But that modulo this little detail, really you get the gist of what a chosen plaintext attack is. Okay, so now chosen plaintext attacks are good, especially to model the behavior of a passive adversary. But sometimes adversaries are active. So there's another attack scenario known as chosen ciphertext attack, which is even stronger in the sense that it gives more abilities to the adversary. Okay, now this is good for security, but also makes it more challenging. So good for security because if no such adversary achieves their goal, then it means that the system must be very secure. But of course, it also makes the design of a secure system meeting those security requirements even harder. So it's typically good for public key cryptography. We'll get back to that in a different video. So let's just see what chosen ciphertext attack, how they differ to chosen plaintext attacks. Okay, so in a chosen ciphertext attack, instead of making encryption queries, the adversary is allowed to choose the ciphertext of their choice, send them to the challenger, and the challenger has to decrypt them all and send back the decryption to the adversary. Then the adversary chooses two messages. Of course, per the rules of the game, those two messages cannot be part of the ones that they've received. Okay, that will just be too easy. And then they send that to the challenger, and the challenger picks one, sends it back. Okay, and then that's the you want the adversary wants to decide which one was encrypted. Now there's even a variant where a second phase is allowed, where more decryption queries are allowable, but these guys cannot match this guy per the rule of the game. Okay, so so that's for chosen ciphertext attacks, slightly more involved than chosen plaintext attacks, and really relevant mostly for certain kinds of cryptography where encryption is possible without the secret key. So now let's talk about now the advantage. The security, we've seen the security goal, we've seen some attack models, and then for the security goal that we've presented, so semantic security, let's see how we can define an advantage. So how we can measure the success of an adversary. So remember, the adversary is facing, well, has two plaintext that they chose and one ciphertext that they've received, and they're trying to figure out which plaintext is encrypted in that ciphertext. Okay. Now you could say the advantage is their probability of success, but it wouldn't be so great because at least you'd have an advantage of 50%, of 1/2, just by flipping a coin, right? So instead, to make an advantage more, to make this number a little bit more intuitive, we decided to be basically the difference between the probability of success and 1/2. So what it means is an advantage close to 0 means the adversary is really bad. And that's what you really want, you know, for a scoring system, right? You're close to 0, you're bad. And then the advantage can be as good as 1/2. Okay, so it's a number between 0 and 1/2. And so, like I said, being close to 0 means you're bad. However, you have to be really careful when you derive conclusions from that score when it comes to the assessment of the cryptographic scheme that you're looking at. In particular, so if you have one good adversary, that means the system is not secure. But one bad adversary does not make the system secure. It's really the absence of a good adversary that makes the system secure. So all adversaries must be bad in order for the system to be secure, or one adversary must be good for the system to be deemed insecure, okay? Now, last, I want to talk about side channel attacks. It's just an illustration of the fact that sometimes there are points of failures that you would not necessarily think about. So in particular, when the adversary has a physical access to the computing device. So here I represented this by a chipset. So if they can listen to some parameters, for example, the timing of execution, so it's called timing attacks, or the power consumption. So if they can listen to the power consumption, if they can even like listen to the noise, so that is acoustic attacks, that is something that exists, or looking at electromagnetic emissions, all of that might give the adversary insight as to what is happening inside of the computing device, and in particular could give them information about the secret values. And when we leverage those kinds of this kind of information, then this is called a side channel attack. So this is it for this lecture on the attack models, and I thank you very much for your attention.